All right, so now we are going to look at the muscles of the hind limb. And this is going to be the majority of the muscles that I want you guys to learn. We're going to learn a few others, but like I mentioned before, we're not going to go too crazy. We're going to take things fairly easily. So one of the first things that we can do is we can take our forceps and we can kind of pinch the skin. And you'll notice that in certain places the skin is very loose. Okay? And that's great. If we were dealing with a mammal like Felis, or we're dealing with a shark, we don't see that so much. And in fact, skinning it it's not terribly hard, but it's not going to be as easy as it will be for getting below the skin of the frog. So I'm going to try to keep the light out here because I think that you might see things a little bit better. I'm going to pinch it with my forceps, the skin, and I'll take my fingers and I'll resume pinching it with my fingers there. And what I want to do is I want to snip, just a little snip. That's it. Just enough now that I can take one end, the pointy end of my scissors, and put it below the skin. I'm pinching the skin, pulling it up towards me so that I'm not cutting any of the muscle. Remember, we're going slow here. We're going very slow. So I'll cut a little bit. Now here's a good idea to try to get used to. Don't use your fingers to continue to pinch it, but use your forceps. And then come over here to where you've made a cut through the skin. And now hold it by the actual cut, the incision. And this way you can hold it up and you can look underneath the skin. So I'm bringing my head down and I'm looking under the skin. I'm making sure to be very careful not to cut through any muscle. One of the things you're going to notice right off the bat is that below the skin, there's really very little connective tissue joining the skin to the muscle. That's what's different between, well, that's one difference between dissecting something like Felis, something like Chondrichthyes, and our frog here, Lithobates, is the skin is very loose, very little fascia. There will still be some connective tissue that we'll have to go through, but it makes things a lot easier. One of the other things you're going to notice as you start to open it up, and notice I'm going slow, I'm not rushing anything because I want you to follow along with me. There's a rhyme and a reason to something we're about to do. So you just go along with me here. You'll look down in there, in this cavity, and you're going to see a lot of fluid. All right? So you're sitting everything on your tray. All right? Your tray is that styrofoam tray that you were given. And that way, if there's any juices, you'll be able to collect those juices. What I would also do is take a paper towel and put the paper towel underneath your frog. All right, I'll wait. Take a paper towel and put it underneath the frog. I already have a paper towel that I've started. And you'll notice mine's very wet. Yours won't be wet, yours will be dry. We should have given you some paper towels to use. So you'll have your frog sitting on the paper towel. As you start to open it, turn it over and let some of that fluid drain out. And you might have to do that from time to time as we go through the dissection. Be careful because as you're going, and if you press on a certain area, like abdomen or whatnot, you might have juices squirt out. We want to make sure that we keep everything as dry as possible. From time to time, I'll also turn my frog around. And now I can start cutting towards the posterior side. Okay? As we get down here, you may notice there's some connective tissue joining the muscle to the skin. What I want to do now, we've now made a cut down the skin from the anterior to the posterior side, close to the body. I'm not cutting through muscle. I'm using my forceps to pull the skin up the entire time. I'm now going to cut distally down the thigh region until I get to the beginning of the cruise. So now I can see the muscles on the medial side of my hind limb. And you can see in the posterior region here, I have this connective tissue. Let's take our scissors and let's cut through that connective tissue. Now be careful. Stop real quick and take a look. First, I have some fluid in here, so I'm going to turn this over and drain some of that out. I have this muscle that's running down the hind limb. I have quite a few here. I have this one running down the hind limb. And if you look deep, there's another muscle that's sitting up against the skin. I'm not cutting that muscle. That's a small ribbon-like muscle. You can see it joins up here. So I'm going to be very careful not to cut that. Maybe one thing I can do is reposition my frog so that I'm cutting from the distal side up. Another thing I could do is take my probe and use my probe to try to separate that muscle from the skin. I want to keep that muscle intact. See how slow I'm going? I'm literally looking at a strand at a time of connected tissue. Feel free to watch me before you jump in. Keep this muscle though. Don't want it cut. And it might be just going back and forth with your forceps. You can pick at that connective tissue. And I'm just going back and forth, freeing that muscle from the skin. I'm going real slow, really slow. All right, once I get to about here, make sure not to cut through that muscle. I'm going to take my frog and I'm going to turn it now so that I'm cutting along to the lateral side of that hind limb. I'll use my forceps to bring the skin off of the muscle below, going real slow, and I'm peeking below to make sure that I'm not cutting through any muscle. You're going to see once again connective tissue right around here that's joining those muscles to the skin. You may need to manipulate your frog as you do this to make it more comfortable for you as you're cutting. And you always have one hand kind of holding that leg outstretched. Here I have that connective tissue, so I'm lifting the skin. I'm using my hands, but we're being real careful. We're going real slow. And now look, I'm righty. I'm not left-handed. So if I'm uncomfortable doing it that way, and I want to hold it and cut with my right hand, I might find this a little easier to do. As I'm lifting it, I can see down below and I can see that tissue that I'm cutting. Once you feel like you've gotten it freed up enough, come back over, lift up the skin so you can see where you're going to cut next. And I'm going to finish cutting along the lateral side, and I'm going to join it back to my cut on the medial side. Take your time. Once you've done that, what I can now do, outstretch that leg. Remember, we cut down the length of the leg muscle, or down the length of the thigh on the medial side, the ventral side. So I now can kind of unfold this. I'll see more of that connective tissue, and I'll free it up a little bit just to get down to that knee region. Go nice and slow. Up here I'll do the same thing. I'm on the medial side. I'm just going to clean things up. Free up that knee. Get that knee sticking out there. Looks good. All right, let's go to the medial side. So the ventral side of the frog is facing towards you. This is the first side that we started our cut. And I want to take a look at this. Take a look at this leg. Maybe real quick I can zoom in here. And I can show you a few things. On this side, we're going to have just a few muscles. This one that we have running along the posterior side, you can see there should be a distinctive line. Notice I have another line up here. So I have this triangular muscle in between. Towards the posterior side, this one, this is going to be gracilis. Gracilis. And there actually is a gracilis major and a gracilis minor. Both major and minor would be homologous to the gracilis muscle in Felis. If you look to that little tiny muscle that we saved, we made sure we didn't cut, that's gracilis minor. This bigger one is gracilis major. Now, most of these muscles in the frog are compartmentalized and surrounded by this fascia. So notice that line once again. What I want you to do is I want you to take your scissors and real carefully just pick. You're picking at that line a little until you can get the very pointy end of your scissors just underneath it. We don't want to go through the muscle. And I can go real slow, and I can cut down that line, freeing up that muscle now. So that I can take something like my forceps, or maybe my probe would work better. Now, if you have this type of probe, where it's very pointy, I want you to be careful because that's going to really tear through the muscle fibers. If you have a blunt probe, that's good. If you want, you could just use your forceps. You can just gently free up that muscle so you can see deep to it. And then Likewise, I'll take my frog, I'll spin it around, and I'll go the other way. Up towards the body, freeing up gracilis major. Use my probe to just kind of, there's going to be some connective tissue in there that connects the muscle to another, and you can free it up so you can see now gracilis major very nicely. Gracilis minor's down here. If it's still connected really well to gracilis major, that's okay. So that's gracilis major. We have this triangular muscle here, and that's the next one we're going to free up. This is going to be adductor magnus. Adductor magnus. So let's take our probe. We can actually go to where we're freeing up gracilis. We're going to do the same thing. Go nice and slow. You're not going deep, you're going with the muscle. Not deep, with the muscle. You're barely sticking your scissors under that fascia, and you're just freeing up the line of that muscle. Go real slow with this. Take your probe and clean it up. One thing you're going to notice as soon as you do this is that this muscle is a lot bigger than we gave it credit for. It's not just a small triangular muscle. As you start to go deep, that muscle goes out towards the anterior portion. And we don't have to free it up too much, just enough that we can see, hey, look, there's the muscle. Running anterior to that is this muscle here. You can see towards the anterior side, there's a line here. This muscle, that if you put your probe or your forceps, here I'll use my forceps just in case people don't have that probe like I do. I close them, I just kind of run them underneath. Real gentle, like real gentle. This muscle here, anterior to adductor magnus, is sartorius. Sartorius. Find that line for the anterior side of sartorius. Sartorius is kind of like a ribbon-like muscle. And once again, free that muscle. Now I'm doing something here on purpose. As I free that muscle following the line, I don't know if you can see this on mine. This was adductor magnus, sartorius. I freed the line all the way up to here. But notice there's a line here. And I might have to actually take the limb and put some pressure on the knee to kind of push up on the thigh. You see this line here. Let me clean that line real quick. In fact, if I take my forceps, I go back underneath sartorius, and I just kind of gently pull them back and forth. You see it starts coming out here? what we're looking at here, here's my sartorius. This real thin one that's in the front. This one here. Here's sartorius, very ribbon-like. In front is adductor longus. Adductor longus. Longus, sartorius, adductor magnus, gracilis major, gracilis minor. In front or anterior to adductor longus, I have this very large muscle. This is triceps femoris. Triceps femoris. I'll show you triceps femoris again. Let's flip our frog over to the back end here. On the back end, I'm going to have a few muscles as well. And I have in the back region, I have some more connective tissue I'm just going to remove to make it so I can look at these muscles a little bit better.